Hi, I'm Kristen Denny Chambers. Today I'm going to do another quick walkthrough of the Round 2 Oklahoma 2020 All-State Music for B-flat clarinet. This is the fast etude out of the Selected Studies book, page 17 in G minor. This video is part 1. I'm going to divide this coaching into 3 videos, so this is part 1, and we'll be focusing on the first main section of the music. Let's take a look. Here's the first main section of the music from measure 1 to 24. Let's go through some fingerings, shapes, and breaths first, and then we'll look at some other things. So the first thing in measure 2, you'll have a left hand C natural. In measure 4 and in measure 8, I like to put this little accent here on the third note in measure 4 and the fourth note in measure 8. It helps me in those measures. I tend to get a little tangled, and that helps to kind of redirect what I'm doing. In measure 5 and measure 6, you'll have some more left side C naturals. In measure 13, you have your first place where you can use a 1/1 for your B flat. Works out really nicely coming from this F natural up to 1/1 and back to F natural again. And then down here in measure 20, you have another left C. And in 21 and 22, you can use 1/1 for all of these upper B flats. And on the last one, since you're coming from a G flat using your middle finger, you can do 1/2 for that final B flat in this line. Over in 23, I would use side key for that B flat because we're coming from a G, so that will help, prevent some tangling of your fingers. Now let's take a look at a few shapes that you could add if you like them. In measure 10, I like to decrease and then start very soft in measure 11, and then really build up to this climactic point in measure 13. Then we have this decrescendo printed in the music. And then anytime I see crescendo, I think start soft. So here, think about starting very softly. And I wrote the word wait, because if you wait a little bit later to really do the bulk of your crescendo, it's much more effective. So try to keep it semi-quiet through 13 and 14 and really bring up the sound in 15 to accentuate this fortissimo area. These accents under a slur are executed with air. So you're slurring and then you do an extra little whoosh or a puff of air from way down low to get that effect to come through. In measure 18, a small decrescendo here works nicely, and then you can start this section soft and then do a dramatic crescendo through it, leading to the downbeat of 24 and then backing away. This is just one idea of some shapes. There are many things that can be done with this etude. So as long as it's convincing and you're really committed to what you're doing and it's obvious what you're doing, try some different things and see what seems to work best. This is just one idea, like I said. Now let's go through and find some good places to take extra breaths. So in the first phrase, right here at the end of the first line in measure 4, in between the A and the D is a good spot to take a breath. Obviously, you'll get a really good one here on this 8th rest. The next big place that I like to take a breath is right here in measure 13, right after this B flat. Now, if you need a breath in between those two big breaths, this spot over here at the end of measure 10, right on the bar line, that works out nicely because we're decreasing our volume and we're starting something new. So it's okay to start there and get a breath. The next big place that I generally get a breath is after this F downbeat in measure 19. See this here. Now, this breath over here in 13 all the way to 19, you may need more. So you may need another breath somewhere in there. And there's a lot going on, and there's some big crescendos, so we definitely want to avoid breathing during this big slurred area and this chromatic scale. So if you need to grab a breath, I think right before this climactic point, you could breathe here in measure 15 after the downbeat, or you could wait until after the G and just grab a quick extra breath to get you through that next part. Once you get this big breath in measure 19, hopefully you're good until you have the big rest. But if you need another breath, I think it's okay to grab a quick one at the end of this line, at the end of measure 22, right before the chord changes again. The next thing I want to talk about is the articulation style in this etude. This one could really stump you because unless you're going really, really quickly, a stop staccato sounds a little strange and a little bit choked off. And if you're too legato, you also miss the style. So I'm going to introduce something called open staccato, and that's where you play your sound and then you stop your air. If your air support is really solid, then you can execute an open staccato with a beautiful result. I'm going to play the first two measures, and the first style I'm going to do is a stopped staccato, and then I'm going to do a more legato approach, and then I'll talk about some places where you can try open staccato. Here's stop staccato at a moderate tempo. And here's legato. Both of those approaches I have constant air support. So now when I try my open staccato, I'm going to try to keep that air support going, even though I'm kind of ha-ha-haing my way through it. If you think about supporting from really down low, the way that a singer warms up, ha 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 ha, it really helps to execute the open staccato. So the notes that I would do open staccato would be any eighth note. So I'm talking about this G, and then all three of these notes. They're all going to be played with an open staccato. Ha, ta, ta, ha, 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 ha. Although I am going to articulate as well with that. So I'll play that slowly and then I'll try it quickly. And here's the quicker version. It's definitely a little bit of a workout from your abs, but I think the result is worth it. I'm going to do 3 articulations back to back so you can really hear. I'll start with legato, then stop staccato, and then I'll do my open staccato so that you can hear the differences. If you choose to do the open staccato, you can continue this throughout the entire etude. So every time there is an eighth note, it can be played with open staccato. Just make sure your air is really supporting underneath it. Another thing that we can take a look at are these accents. So at the beginning, we have an accent on the first note. In measure 3, we have accents on beat 1 and in beat 2. And then we get no other accent markings. But I think that every time we see this figure, so in measure 5, measure 6, measure 7, I think those accents are implied. I think that the composer meant for those to remain. You may have noticed that in many of your etudes, composers will mark the first few measures very specifically, and then the rest is just left empty. And those articulations or those markings are generally implied to be continued through the music. And sometimes they'll write the word simile, which is really helpful, but often they don't. So then it's up to our ear and our musical training to figure out what's going to be the best style to continue throughout the piece. Another thing about articulation to consider is note length. So yes, we talked about stop staccato, open staccato, but I feel like in the first measure, the first note could be a little bit longer. And then over here in measure 3, I think these accented notes could be long. So the first eighth note of beat 1 and the first eighth note of beat 2, I think those could be longer, even though I'm going to probably play the last eighth notes staccato. I'll put my little dots here for staccato. And if you continue that throughout the etude, I think it really makes sense, especially when we get down to measure 19 and we have these pedals. So the F, the thumb F can be long and the upper F can be short. So you're going da, 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 da. I think that gives a really nice style and it helps to accentuate this lower pedal. So there are a lot of things to experiment with here, but really use your ear, record yourself, let others listen to you. If you have a private teacher, obviously they're going to help you. And if you have questions, you can contact me as well. Another thing I like to talk about is balancing volumes. We want to really be aware of where we are on the instrument as far as how loud and soft we play. The low range of the clarinet, especially down here, like in measure 11, can get lost very easily. So even though it's piano, you might want to have a little bit more substance to your sound there. And then when we crescendo and we're in an upper range, we want to avoid pushing too much, because if we push too much in the upper notes, the tone can spread. This is really effective down here in measure 19 when we have these chords. So definitely want to be big on bottom. I call it bob. So have your sound big on the bottom and lighter as you go towards the top of each of these chords. Even though we're doing a general crescendo through here, you can still do big on bottom through these. So you have these sort of implied tiny decrescendos as you play each chord. I'll try to draw a few of them in here. So there. All the while doing this large, bigger picture crescendo through the phrase. Finally, I want to go through a tricky spot in the etude. Starting at 19 to the end of this section, that is a place that a lot of people struggle with. Every beat, the chord changes. We have a lot of fingering things we're doing, like left C, 1/1 B flat, 1/2 B flat. We have accidentals to be looking for, like F flat is the same as E natural. So there's just a lot going on here, and I have a separate page to help work out this section. So we'll take a look at that and then we'll come back to this page. These exercises will help us get through measure 19 to 24, hopefully with some success. Many of us know that practice rhythms are very helpful, but I think also regrouping the notes can be very helpful too. So let's look at number 1. This is just the first and last note of each group in the measures. As you play through that first exercise, we definitely want the lower note to be louder. Now, as we look at exercise number 2, we will only be looking at the 8th note rhythms. So we're leaving out that little 16th note in the middle and turning the middle note into an 8th note. Now, as we look at the third exercise, we'll play the low pedal longer, and we'll actually play that second 16th note. The fourth exercise includes all of the pitches in this section, but the rhythm is simplified. This gives you some time to think ahead and look ahead. It's also a lot easier on the eyes. Of course, these are just a few ideas on different ways that you could practice this section. You can do more rhythmic variety, play things forwards and backwards, just whatever else you can come up with, but this is a great place to start. Now let's go back to the etude and play that first big section. Before I play, the next question you might be asking yourself is, how fast should this go? My answer is always, whatever tempo you can play accurately and with good style. So, yes, it's meant to be a faster moving etude, but only if you're able to execute it quickly. Too many people play their auditions too quickly and make too many mistakes. So it's always better to be a little under tempo and to be clean with great style than to go too fast and feel like you're tumbling out of control. For today, I'm setting my metronome at 60 for the dotted quarter note. One thing I forgot to do is connect to the next section. After measure 24, measure 25 is an entire measure of rest. And believe it or not, many people make the mistake of coming in too early in the next section. So I'm going to play 23 to the end of this section here, including the first measure of the next part. And that way you get used to hearing that 2 full counts of silence. Okay, I think we've wrapped up the first section of this etude. Be sure to join me on videos 2 and 3 so we can finish it out together. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at clarinetplayground@gmail.com. See you next time.